The last time we saw Ratchet and Clank, Insomniac was making their first attempt at bringing this charming duo of intergalactic heroes to the big screen. A feat which sadly didn't go as well as some might have hoped, but at least we got a fairly decent remake of the original game. However, due to it being a movie tie-in and not a proper remake of the original, the game ultimately suffered, constrained by the movie tie-in curse when they simply should have done a full-fledged recreation of the first game. But now, 5 years later, we've been blessed with the latest entry in one of PlayStation's most iconic duos. It is a game that sidesteps the remake's narrative and instead continues after the future trilogy's story, giving us a game that builds upon what has already been established while at the same time paving the way for the future of this franchise. So let's talk about it. This is Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart. Set several years after the events of Into the Nexus, Ratchet and Clank find themselves taking part in a parade to honor their lives as galactic heroes. It's during this public event that Clank reveals that he's repaired the Dimensionator, a device capable of opening portals into other dimensions. With it, he hopes that Ratchet can find his family, who are hiding out somewhere in the multiverse. However, before either of them can react, Dr. Nefarious suddenly attacks the parade and steals the Dimensionator. In their attempt to reclaim the device, Ratchet ends up damaging it, resulting in it malfunctioning and opening random rifts all over the galaxy. Amidst this cataclysm, Ratchet and Clank and Dr. Nefarious end up being separated as they're transported to an alternate universe, one in which Dr. Nefarious is the undisputed ruler. It's here that Clank ends up being found by a female Lombax named Rivet, a rebel who's been fighting against Emperor Nefarious for years now and has been struggling to protect the galaxy at large. But now with the universes tearing themselves apart, only by working together can our heroes stand a chance of saving the dimensions from the impending cataclysm. Firstly, I have to say that the story is superb, especially when compared to the 2016 remake. Since it isn't restricted to what happens in a film, events in the story feel more natural. There's a clear escalation of events throughout, with the pace ramping up whenever the action becomes more intense. Yet the narrative is also willing to slow down when it needs to, giving its characters the time to talk, provide some exposition, or simply tell a joke.
Are you always suspicious that anyone you meet works for Emperor Nefarious?
Pretty much everyone I meet does work for Emperor Nefarious.
Ah, a fair point.
Rift Apart takes advantage of the new setting to give us a reality that is both familiar to veterans of the franchise while also providing us with something entirely new. You'll meet a large cast of wacky characters on this adventure, many of whom are alternate versions of already established characters. From a secret agent iteration of Skid McMarx, to a French version of Rusty Pete. It's always fun to see different takes on prominent characters, and the developers clearly had a lot of fun creating these, while the rest of the new characters are standouts in their own way, whether from a design standpoint or through their actions in the story. Speaking of alternate versions of established characters, I won't deny that I was a little worried when Insomniac introduced us to Rivet. My biggest concern was that she would simply be used as a marketing tool or means to undermine already established canon, but thankfully I was proven wrong very quickly. Rivet is her own character, one who has lived the life of a hero, but unlike her male counterpart who's found success and admiration over the years, Rivet has struggled to simply keep those close to her safe while Emperor Nefarious conquers the whole universe. This struggle is reflected quite well through her actions and even her character design. Insomniac has clearly put a lot of work into distinguishing both of our Lombaxes, which has had the noticeable effect of preventing Rivet from turning into a stereotypical gender swap of Ratchet, a sentiment which is also carried over to their robotic companions. Clank is still the same quirky and analytical robot we know, but events in the story have forced him to confront many truths about himself and his best friend. Furthermore, having him spend time with Rivet before his inevitable reunion with Ratchet allows the player to grow accustomed to the new player character. By comparison, his female counterpart Kit is a much more shy and paranoid person. She harbors many dark secrets about herself, resulting in the little robot lacking any confidence in her own abilities. So having her first partnership be with a more optimistic and relaxed Ratchet enables Kit to slowly come out of her shell, providing the little robot with the push she needs to become more assertive with herself.
Because I am an interior decorator, first class. And the Emperor wanted this redecoration to be a surprise for you and your team. But now, you ruined it.
I would never do that to the Emperor. Please come in and consider my memory banks deleted.
Which, when you break it down, is what Rift Apart is all about. While it is the next chapter in Ratchet and Clank's adventures, it's also the origin story for Insomniac's two newest heroes, Rivet and Kit, both of whom clearly possess enough differences to stand out from each other while also having the chemistry necessary for a partnership like this to work. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Insomniac intends to make a spin-off title focusing on them in the future, and frankly, I'd be down for it. This game quickly proves that neither duo lacks the charisma or the character to carry a story. Ratchet and Clank both exude years of combat experience while at the same time manage to stay the same charming pair from the original trilogy. Rivet and Kit, on the other hand, are far more unbalanced. Neither is a slouch when it comes to fighting, so the vast majority of their conflicts are internal rather than external. From the get-go, it's pretty clear that they both have trust issues, which makes their slowly formed partnership so much more meaningful in the long run. Furthermore, I've always admired how this series has never been afraid to put its characters into uncomfortable positions, and Rift Apart is no different. In fact, I'd say it has easily one of the best written stories in the whole series, with it even tackling issues of self-worth, PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Throughout the game, it becomes clear that our heroes will need to overcome these flaws if they are to succeed in saving the dimensions. Yet because the game is willing to slow down and give these characters a chance to breathe, it makes all the drama so much more palpable in the long run. It is an exceptional story, and it's complemented by some well-refined gameplay. Like every other entry in the series, Rift Apart is a solid blend of gunplay and exploration, but with the advantages brought to Insomniac by the PS5, now they can do so much more than simply make the levels bigger. For starters, the basics of combat hasn't changed a whole lot. You have your wrench, which you can use for close quarters combat, or in Rivet's case a hammer. These can be thrown like a boomerang to hit distant targets, or slammed downwards onto an enemy while in the air. Meanwhile, the guns are a good blend of new and classic weapons. You've got pistols, machine guns, shotguns, gloves that can throw bombs, and a wide assortment of different minions that can be used to support you. There's also various kinds of explosive, elemental, and gimmick-based weapons to use, so there's plenty of variety to be found in the weapons, and the developers are smart enough to give you a lot of options right from the get-go, allowing the player to decide how they want to approach every combat encounter, whether they want to go in guns blazing, pick off enemies from a distance, employ a weapon with an elemental effect, or simply rush in and hope for the best. The combat is enjoyable enough that you don't need to approach every fight with a plan, but it gives you plenty of choices so you can make combat as tactical as you want it to be. Furthermore, with the exception of one weapon in the endgame, none of the guns in Rift Apart are powerful enough to make most fights a one-sided affair. Each of your weapons has their own ammo, damage output, and respective fire rate, so you'll find that certain weapons are better suited to certain situations than others. However, it's best not to rely on one specific weapon for every fight, otherwise you'll end up being overwhelmed by your enemies as you're forced to use your weaker weapons. Ratchet and Clank's combat has always been designed so that you take advantage of your large arsenal and constantly switch between weapons in order to stay alive, while the idea of restricting yourself to only using one or two weapons can lead to failure. But thanks to the game's progression system, there's more than enough reason for you to want to upgrade every gun in your arsenal. Like previous entries in the series, with every kill your guns earn experience points. Earn enough and your weapons will level up, increasing their overall stats. However, once a gun reaches max level, they'll transform, often resulting in your weapons earning some new traits to employ in combat. Of course, killing enemies isn't the only way to improve your weapon's capabilities. Usually the weapon vendor is used only to stock up on ammo and buy new guns, but here you can also improve them with raritanium, a crystal substance that can be found throughout the galaxy. With it, you'll be able to improve the stats of your guns. Furthermore, if you spend enough on a particular gun, then you'll have the means to unlock additional perks for it, like allowing you to deploy multiple turrets or giving your rocket launcher the means to home in on enemies. These additions can drastically alter how you use a weapon in combat, often giving you a new way to approach a fight or take on a boss. But if you find that the main game isn't giving you enough of a challenge, then you can always tackle some of the arena challenges at Xerxes. From there, you'll find all kinds of different ways to test your skills while also earning some prizes. As a whole, the combat is well refined, which is hardly surprising. Ever since this franchise has debuted on the PS2, Ratchet and Clank has always had some very enjoyable combat. All Rift Apart has done is fine-tuned it, making it easily the most responsive and enjoyable iteration to date. There's also a number of subtle changes to the combat that I really like how you can throw your melee weapon while you move when you originally had to hold yourself in place, or how about the alternate firing modes. Every weapon in game now has two different modes of fire which can be easily switched between thanks to the PS5's DualSense controllers. For example, if you simply press the fire button when using the shadow bomb, you'll throw an explosive, but if you hold down on the button about halfway, then you'll actually be able to aim the shadow bomb at a target. It's simple additions like these that add an extra layer of depth to an already well-crafted combat system, which is only further complicated once you take all your traversal skills into consideration. When it comes to exploring your environment, Rift Apart easily has the most variety in terms of gameplay mechanics. This is mostly due to how simple the platforming throughout the franchise has been. Since there hasn't been any real reason to innovate in this area, the traversal mechanics have remained mostly unchanged until now. As such, exploration in Rift Apart feels fresher and more exciting when compared to previous entries in this franchise. Yet it's also familiar thanks to your standard moveset remaining the same. Like any other Ratchet and Clank game, you can jump, double jump, and glide with ease. When it comes to gadgets, you've got a large selection available right from the start, and funny enough, most of them are shoes. The swing shot is effectively a grappling hook that enables you to latch onto targets and swing across wide gaps. Your magna boots allow you to stick to metal surfaces, while your grind boots allow you to travel across rails. Then there's your hover boots, which enable you to travel long distances quickly, a vital tool when traversing the game's larger levels or needing to quickly escape a fight. All the basic essentials are there. However, thanks to the PS5's hardware, the player is able to instantaneously travel from one location in-game to another without having to disrupt the gameplay. This is best showcased by a new gadget called the Rift Tether. Essentially, it allows Ratchet and Rivet to pull themselves towards a tear in reality, effectively allowing them to move quickly between different points in the game. This can be used to cross gaps, explore the game's many vast levels, or traverse a battlefield quickly. Furthermore, the Rift Tether can be used at any point, even if you're in mid-air or on a grind rail. But that's not all. The Rift Tether is the only way to access the many pocket dimensions scattered throughout the galaxy. These are essentially optional platforming challenges that are hidden in the game. Each one features its own dangers, and more often they serve as a test for your platforming skills. But should you manage to reach the end of one, then you'll find a piece of armor waiting to be collected. Armor in Rift Apart not only alters Ratchet and Rivet's individual appearance, but they also provide them with an in-game buff, like dealing additional damage to a particular kind of enemy or supplying you with more bolts. As such, it's highly advised that you seek these out, if for no other reason than to make your Lombaxes look cooler, especially since you can alter the armor's color palette to your liking. Of course, new armor isn't the only thing hidden throughout your environment. There's raritanium to upgrade your weapons, gold bolts to access hidden extras, and schematics to unlock the latest edition of the Rhino, many of which will require careful timing and precision in order to find. But thanks to your friend the Phantom, you'll have both the means to find these secrets and save yourself from danger should you need to. While the Rift Tether does allow you to basically teleport across the map instantly, it's only a viable tool if there are tears in your general vicinity. If there are no tears, then it's basically useless, which is where the Phantom Dash comes in. Essentially, this gadget allows you to propel yourself forward, much like the dash move in Doom Eternal, during which your character will be temporarily invulnerable to damage, making it an effective method to avoid enemy attacks, especially since you won't have to meet certain in-game requirements in order to use this gadget. But that's not all, it also gives you the means to run along walls, which is such a simple addition, and yet it drastically alters the traversal mechanics in Rift Apart, where once you'll simply be struggling to jump between platforms, now you can be simultaneously switching between wall running, swinging, flying, and grinding all in a matter of seconds. Never before has movement in a Ratchet and Clank game been this fluid, and it's bloody incredible. Of course, you won't always be traversing the landscape on foot. There are many worlds in Rift Apart that will require the aid of an animal companion for exploration, like the Speedle, a super fast bug that you'll latch onto like a bull rider at a rodeo. Or how about Trudy, a literal space dragon who you'll get to fly, and like any good space dragon, she can breathe fire. As I've always said, if you want to improve your game, just add a dragon. It works every time. However, should you find yourself face to face with some corrupted technology out in the game world, then thankfully you also have the means to explore cyberspace. Thanks to a little robot spider named Glitch, you'll be able to take down the nastiest of computer viruses with ease, a feat which is made easier due to the controls being simple to master, preventing any unintentional disruptions in the gameplay. The same could be said for when you're controlling any of your animal companions. Still, in the event you do die at any point, then you won't have to wait too long. The game is very forgiving, and since the load times are so fast, you'll barely notice that you've screwed up at all. Instead, you'll be dumped right back into the action without a moment to lose, which is without a doubt Rift Apart's biggest strength. If there was ever a game to showcase what next gen can do, it's this one. The entirety of Rift Apart is built around the idea of seamless transitions from one world to the next. So whether you're traveling to a new planet or entering an alternate reality, you won't ever have to wait at a load screen before you can start having fun. For Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart, load times simply don't exist anymore.
Here we go.
If there was one aspect of gameplay that I wish we got to explore more of, it would be whenever you're playing as Clank or Kit. At certain intervals throughout the game, you'll have the opportunity to send your robotic assistant into a dimensional anomaly, which is basically a fancy way of forcing the player to complete a puzzle in order to progress the story. Not that I'm complaining. Since A Crack in Time, the developers have clearly learned that Clank wasn't cut out for combat, so instead they reworked his gameplay with more of a focus on puzzles than fighting. This really worked out well for him in the long run, and these latest puzzles are some of the most inventive in the series, with the basic goal being to open a door on the other side of a room, while you have to guide your possibilities to the door safely. This is done through careful manipulation of your environment, and I won't lie that some of these puzzles can be quite tricky. I only wish that there were more of them in the game. Maybe if the developers had included 1 or 2 extra puzzles as a side challenge, it would have given the robot segments more merit aside from being a part of the story. But as they are, they're still enjoyable, especially since it gives you the chance to savor some of Rift Apart's crazy sound design. Featuring a score composed by Mark Mothersbaugh and Wataru Hokoyama, who you might recognize from such films as Hotel Transylvania and Thor Ragnarok, Insomniac was able to give Rift Apart a soundtrack that was both retro and futuristic, one which utilized a wide myriad of different instruments, allowing them to maintain a nice balance between more dramatic and tranquil tunes throughout, without having to sacrifice the tone or aesthetic present in the game world. This notion extends to the sound design, which is a good blend between futuristic and more natural sounds, from the wind rushing against Trudy's wings as she flies, to the torrents created by the waves on many of Rift Apart's ocean-based worlds. There's a wicked harmony to be found in this Pixar-esque adventure, one which is clearly mirrored by the story's large cast of characters. Rift Apart's protagonists are able to easily showcase their quirkiness and charm without losing any of the weight present in this high-stakes narrative. James Arnold Taylor and David Kay haven't missed a beat when it comes to voicing Ratchet and Clank. They're still as charming as ever, and with the game's stellar writing, they're able to perfectly showcase the trust present in this well-established friendship. While Deborah Wilson is able to perfectly capture Kit's vulnerabilities without making her too ardent, she strikes the right balance between reserved and emotional. However, out of everyone in the cast, it's Jennifer Hale who stands out the most as Rivet. She's able to expertly evoke the charm of such a heroic character, while also maintaining the intricacies and longing present in someone with such a tragic backstory.
You're nefarious. He looks a lot like mine. Evil like him, too. And that Lombax. I know it might sound crazy, but...
You think he is your dimensional counterpart.
Or something. Look, whatever's going on here, we're gonna fix it.
Yet no matter how grim the story gets, there's always a feeling of hope throughout, one that is often invoked by the game's soundtrack or through its visuals. From a visual standpoint, Rift Apart is easily one of the most colourful and vibrant games on the PS5. More often, its graphics are comparable to that of a Disney movie, which is hardly surprising, especially after all the work Insomniac put into their own movie. I wouldn't be surprised if that helped inspire this new look for their game. Ratchet and Clank has always maintained a cartoony aesthetic, but in some of the more recent games they've been trying to evoke a sense of realism in many of their textures, in particular with the environments and the detailing on some of the character models. The main cast clearly have had a lot of work done to make their physical characteristics shine in game, with a nice contrast between their opposing color schemes helping our protagonists stand out from each other. The same could be said for our villains and even the fauna in game. As such, Rift Apart simply looks breathtaking. Its visuals are perfect for traveling across the universe while seeking to repair the multiverse and murder some alien bugs. Unsurprisingly, Insomniac has yet again managed to breathe life into their oldest IP. Ratchet and Clank has never looked this good. Without a doubt, this is easily one of the best entries in the franchise. Not only does it manage to introduce a number of new mechanics with ease, but it also refines the old without losing any of its charm. The new characters are captivating, the fast load times are fucking insane, and with so much content packed into this one game, it'd be impossible not to recommend this. It's easily one of the best games of the year, and I can't wait for what comes next in this franchise. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. I'm the Grave Tender, and thank you for joining me on the other side. Please consider subscribing, and I hope you all have a nice day.